President Joe Biden called Harris today to congratulate her on a, quote, historic campaign. The president also spoke with the president-elect and invited Donald Trump to the White House. One more note, President Biden will address the nation about the election and the transition of power tomorrow. As for Arizona's U.S. Senate race, Congressman Ruben Gallego is still in front of Kari Lake. More than 60% of the total vote has been counted. Gallego's lead has been shrinking. He was up by 120,000 votes last night, but that margin was cut in half by this morning. And for more on these and other races in yesterday's sizable Arizona ballot, we welcome political consultants Chuck Coughlin from High Ground and Matt Grotzky from Matters of State Strategies. Gentlemen, good to have you both here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
All right, Chuck, we'll start with you. Overall thoughts on overall things.
What a great night, right, Ted?
It was an interesting night, that's for sure.
It was fascinating. I mean, those first votes came in. The Republicans were overperforming going into Election Day, and they were like a 6-point Republican advantage. And now they come to the table with these slimmer margins than you think you're going to get on a 6% return. And so then that tightens up, and it looks like it could be competitive. And then Election Day happens, and it just disappears.
Matt, again, thoughts on the election overall? I mean, just in general, your feelings.
Yeah, I think going into it, a lot of us were anticipating something that looked more like 2018, given that there had been a return to pre-pandemic, pre-big live voting behavior. So Republicans voting by mail, Democrats waiting later. So anticipated a red mirage, but I think it was surprising to a lot of us to see just the overwhelming support in the direction that wasn't ours, and not seeing the traditional crossover of independents and Republicans we've seen in the past.
Did Donald Trump win, or did Kamala Harris lose?
I think it's a difficult premise to ask. It depends on the time of day, I think, for me. I think that we'll be post-gaming this for a while, but I think he certainly won. I don't think there's any denying that at this stage.
Chuck, as far as you're concerned, win, lose, I mean, the gaffes, the vulgarities, the convictions, all of it. He got more votes now than he did the 2 other times he ran.
I think David Brooks said it well the other day in an article. He said both parties are acting as if they're minority parties, that they're both fighting with each other for control, and neither is acting like a majority party. And that's exhausting, because we're like, can't somebody speak to the whole country here?
Yeah.
Instead of vilifying one party or the other? Can you talk about what America is? And it's the status of where we are today. Both, in my opinion, both parties are irretrievably bad. I mean, the Democrats failed to capture a North Star narrative that captured the country's attention. The narrative during the campaign wandered around the landscape quite a bit. And Trump was there the whole time with one single narrative. Those people are terrible, and they've ruined the country. And I can fix it. I mean, that was his narrative the whole time.
And that was the narrative to a certain degree. Also, it wasn't so much the economy, it was prices, it was affordability. And again, it seems like idealistic folks kind of went one direction, and people who have to pay the bill every week went another direction.
Sure, no, I think that's fair. I think in some of the reflection that Democrats will do after this is, relook at our empathetic messaging on the economy. It was a hard thing to message, right? You have to say, look, I understand that inflation is hurting you week to week, at the grocery store, but also having to articulate, too, that a lot of the reasons for those high prices was because of the Trump administration, right? So you had to square that perfectly, and then you had, the nominee changing and all that, and it's just a very difficult dynamic.
Again, prices, not so much, I mean, again, economy is kind of not everyone, but lots of people have jobs right now, and lots of those jobs pay pretty well. They pay better than they have in the past. There have been more jobs in the past, and yet you go to the grocery store and you go, what's going on here?
Right. Gas was up for a great period of time there. Food prices and inflation was up. We had those lingering supply chain problems. It just developed into this narrative that really wasn't reflected in the newer day-to-day economy, with the exception of food prices at the grocery store. Right. I could discern, I was looking around going, I think we're doing pretty good. The stock market's blowing and going, unemployment is way down, interest rates are going down, the economy looks healthy, but it's like the American public was exhausted from the last couple years of struggle on the economy.
Trump apparently did very well with males, especially young males, and Harris, it sounds like, did not do all that well with young females. What's that all about?
I think we're going to, again, have to post-game all that out. But, I think Trump has had, 8 years, 9 years to be defined and, be analyzed by the populace and the voters. And she didn't have that much time. Barring the primary she had previously in 2019 and 2020, voters were really just getting to know her these last 100 days. So I think had she had more time, you could have remedied some of that.
What do you think?
What's the unifying narrative? What's the North Star of the narrative of the Harris campaign? When they left Chicago, it seemed like they had wrapped themselves pretty well in the flag, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the celebration of the freedom of the American individual. That's what America's about. And then that disappeared. It went away until his speech on the Ellipse the other night, and she came back to it, and she reverted to the grievance. It's about women. It's about the economy. It's about your payroll. It's about these individuals. There was never, to me, and I look at young voters today. If you're 28 years old, all you've known is Donald Trump at the top of the ticket. That's it. That's the only thing you'll ever know. Now we're going to have another 4 years on that.
Right.
And it's how do you inspire young people? I don't really know the answer to that at 62, but I want to hear some iconic American values about what it is to be an American and why America should be celebrated.
Does that make sense, or does it make sense that the Harris campaign simply wasn't aggressive enough? I had heard people saying that she needs to do what Chuck says. She needs to do more of that and present who you are and forget about who you're against. I'm wondering if she shouldn't have just gone up there and I'm the candidate who's not a convicted felon.
Yeah, I think she did degrees of that all the time. It's a little bit like whack-a-mole. She had to be perfect and get every issue all the time, and he just had to say the other side was terrible the entire time. But I also think there were headwinds that she was facing. The infrastructure was there for, a Republican victory, just given the fact that, her boss, the president, who obviously my side supports, has got a 40% approval rating. And that's hard when you have to defend that message and present a new outlook for the future.
It was like John McCain when he inherited the second Bush term.
Yes.
Everybody was done.
Right.
Yes.
Nobody wanted another Republican term.
Right.
The economy went south. Obama popped up in Iowa, and everybody went that way. And it felt sort of like that type of an election where that hangover from Biden and the 4 years of struggle that the country's gone through, whether we agree with that or not, it was perceived to be there. That was too much.
That younger male vote, the Latino male vote especially, very strong toward Trump, at least in terms of comparison to previous votes. Would Mark Kelly, as a vice president candidate, would he have made a difference?
I mean, I think there's all kinds of, Monday morning quarterbacks. I've heard Shapiro because of his connection to Pennsylvania, or Mark Kelly, because of his military background and those things. Given the breadth of the sweep last night, no. It's not going to make a difference. It happened. It was set to happen. The trap lines were all there for this to happen. And guess what? He closed the deal last night.
But again, he got more votes overall around that than he did in 2016 and in 2020. And we've got all of these things on his record. Not exhausted with that, apparently, America, but they are exhausted with the Biden administration.
Apparently, and I do think, and I'd be curious Chuck's take on this, I do think that for some independents and obviously a lot of Republicans, they felt that regardless of the breadth of those negative things against him, I think they felt that he was being persecuted, not so much prosecuted as our side would have seen. So I feel like there was a little bit of, keep piling it on with this guy. We're going to retaliate because we're angry. And it's unfortunate because now there's this constant anger pendulum swinging. Right now our side's angry again, and that's going to motivate us for the next cycle.
We all struggle with the idea of Donald Trump fighting for the little man from his jet and his Mar-a-Lago residence and his apartment in Manhattan, and all the goldness around him. But he captured that. That people believe that. People believe he was fighting against the man, fighting for the little guy, fighting against the system that was set against him. And that's a powerful narrative in America. The little man goes to Washington and fights his way back. We don't want to accept that but people bought that. People do agree with that.
All right, so Chuck, we'll stick with you. The Republican Party. What is the Republican Party right now?
It doesn't exist. It's MAGA. It's now the MAGA party. It's the Make America Great Again party. It's not the Republican Party of John McCain, of Jeff Flake, of John Kyle, Arizona iconic people. It's not even Barry Goldwater's Republican Party. It is this new working class. He's completely morphed the party into a working class, small, representing those formerly Democratic constituencies, and hijacked the party to be them. And it's not an idea-based party. It's not about economic freedom. He's a tariff guy. He's going to do tariffs. So he's not about the economic freedom and free markets. He's not. He's about government spending. He's a big spender. He wants to use the government to support strategic initiatives. I mean, it's not anything like the former Republican Party. It is a whole new entity.
Matt, where does the Democratic Party go from here? Is Kamala Harris the leader of the party? Who is the leader of the party?
That'll be determined. I think at the end of the day, we remain an aspirational party. We're a very highly educated party. We are a coastal party. I think, to Chuck's point, there's been a reorientation in terms of, the working class used to be our base. That's not the case anymore. The leader will sort itself out. I think the thing that people are going to be focusing on now is what is our message going into the midterm cycle? How do we need to reorganize? What's the post-game analysis on where we missed things here? There is energy. People are tired today and they're sad, but they will be pumped up. They will be ready to go.
Tired and sad, but are lessons learned for the Democrats? Are there lessons learned?
Yes, there will be. There's lessons learned. They're still, analyzing everything. It's been less than 24 hours. We'll learn, and we've seen this movie before, and we've been resilient before. There's a lot you can do today. You can bury your head in the sand, or you can focus on how you're going to be constructive, and I think a lot of people are choosing that.
They're going to have to do some soul searching. You're going to have to look inside the party. Most people don't identify with either party anymore. And so what do people identify with? And then choose to either allow those people to participate equally and message to them, or abandon ship and just create a new entity going forward that is representative of America.
Let's talk about the U.S. Senate race here in Arizona. And Matt, we'll start with you. Is this closer than expected? What are you seeing from these numbers?
I think the entire time they were planning for it to be close. It looked like in polling for a while that Congressman Gallego was really running away with it. But everybody anticipated that it would tighten now. Hopefully the current trend lines where his lead was cut in half, hopefully it holds enough where he can fend her off. But it's still a swing state, and we have a registration disadvantage, which is a whole other issue that's going to go in with our soul-searching program. But no, I think that this was anticipated. We just need to, buckle up and hold the line here.
What do you make of the race?
A little closer than I thought it would be. I thought he would have maintained a better lead, but the Republicans organized and turned out on Election Day and shifted the narrative. He's still the second highest vote getter in the state behind the president. Lake has about as many votes as Harris got. That's a pretty equilibrium. And he's the second highest vote getter in the state underneath 139. 139 was the highest vote getter, which was sort of funny to be predicted. But he's there. The remaining ballots that are out there, predominantly from Maricopa County. They're doing, there's 750,000 roughly ballots left out there. They'll do a drop tonight and later tonight. That'll take care of about 250,000 of those votes. He won Maricopa County. He's going to continue to win Maricopa County. The next biggest county will be Pima, and then the other counties will sort of wash themselves out through the mix. But I suspect he's going to be fine.
Matt?
I suspect he's going to be fine. I think the interesting point here is, you talked about the comparison with Harris and Lake. They're both women. And I think that we can't discard the misogynistic nature of some of this stuff.
Well, let's go there just for a second, if we can. Matt, well, we'll start with you for bringing it up in the first place. Yeah, you got Hillary Clinton got more votes than Donald Trump. Has still lost, the race.
Yep.
Kamala Harris did not get more votes than Donald Trump. She still lost the race. Is there something to that?
There is. We got to crack the code on that. But, from personal experience, I was speaking with women at a baseball game earlier this year, and they said they weren't going to vote for her, and it was because they couldn't see her leading the military. This was from women. This was from women of color. And that's anecdotal, but it's something we need to look at, especially as we run candidates and figure out how we're going to, handle our messaging across the country, not just in Arizona. Those aren't things that our party always wants to hear, but it's something that we've got to address, and that's what we're going to be looking at going into the next cycle.
Chuck, I've heard stories of women that are absolutely livid that Donald Trump is going to be president. I mean,
Yes.
for the things that he's
Yes.
accused of doing, the
Yes.
things adjudicated, you know, all.
My colleague, Mr. Cole, was greeted at home last night after with a bottle of wine in that narrative last
Yes.
night. But here's the other thing. I talked to my 30-year-old daughter about this last night. Women are also harder on other women than
Yes.
men are. And that's part of that internal dynamic, that other women have higher standards for judging women, and they hold them to a higher standard. And that also is debilitating. It's not just the misogynistic, what is absolutely true and exists in our culture and our society, but it's also women judging women. And those are both difficult narratives to wrap your arms around.
So, Chuck, what's next for Carrie Lake?
I would assume she will try and make her way into some aspect of the Trump administration and be of service to him in some capacity. She's a very effective spokesperson. She is very much a believer in MAGA. She's very loyal to him. Those are all qualities that he admires and will embrace. So I would assume that. And I think she needs to leave Arizona because I don't think there's a path here for her electorally. It's just been foreclosed. She's done that to herself. She's closed off that narrative and that opportunity herself.
Matt, let's go to Congressional District 1. Interesting race here. When we were off in the air last night, it looked like Shaw was kind of had a chance to upend Schweikert and maybe get an incumbent Republican out of there. A big win for the Democrats, possibly.
Yep.
Things kind of switched overnight. Now it looks like Schweikert might be holding on.
We'll see. I think it's important to stress that it hasn't been called yet. There's still lots of vote to count. The House is crucial in order to maintain a check on President Trump. So we'll see. But I mean, I think we were talking about it before we got started. Schweikert didn't appear much in the general election. He was pretty much under the radar throughout the primary season, and that may have been to his benefit. We'll see. But constantly we've thought that, we can get him. This is the time to get him. After redistricting, we felt confident. And hopefully he doesn't eke it out this time, but he might.
Sounds like he's going to, Chuck.
I think so. I think he'll prevail tonight and tomorrow as these ballots get dropped. But we did talk about that earlier. He didn't have a very passionate personal showing in this, but he did the Republican thing, which is trash your opponent. I may be bad, but that guy's worse.
Right.
I mean, my mailbox was full of things every single night about what a bad guy Amish Shah was. I know Amish, he's not a bad guy. No. He's a decent, emergency room doctor, and it was crazy the amount of negative narrative that they were pounding him with.
If he survives, Schweikert survives, coattails from Trump, pretty much
Well, I think there's a coattail aspect, but I think it's also getting back to voter registration. We've hemorrhaged Democrats, especially in that district, since 2022 when the margin was very tight and we thought that Hodge was going to take it. So I think that's another thing we have to look at. It's not just, coattails, red wave, inevitable. It's what's our message to the independents so that we can get that good crossover voter? And how are we delivering the Democratic message so that we're getting independents, first-time voters to register with our party and not just stay home or go with the Republican Party?
That district's moving towards the Democratic Party.
Is it? Okay.
It's got that North Scottsdale, Fountain Hills area, giant MAGA country up there. But it's also got that area that was Bill Gates's district on the board, which now is going to be Danny Valenzuela's seat on the board. That's flipped. That core part of Central Phoenix from north of Camelback all the way up the 51 up there is gone blue or purplish. So it's an opportunity going forward.
That's the first congressional district, Matt. 6th congressional district. An incumbent there. Looked like some big problems last night. The problem's not quite so big, but there's still problems there.
There's still problems there. Frankly, it caught me by surprise in a good way. I think that Engel is showing tremendous promise. I think several months ago it was hard to gauge that. So remaining hopeful there. But again, it tells a narrative of things that we can aspire to focus on in the next cycles. But again, it comes back to building that Democratic base, fixing voter registration, getting more people, because that's going to be our Achilles heel until we till we get on top of that.
Ciscomani's a pretty good candidate. Are you surprised
is.
it was this close? It is this close.
It is this close. It's this close because the portions of Pima County that are in this district are heavily Democratic. The later stuff that's coming in now is more Republican. It's that Cochise County, it's that southeastern part of Arizona that is more Republican. And as that gets fully reported in, I think you'll see this continue to shape up.
All right, Chuck, we'll stick with you on Prop 139. Massive, massive win.
Top vote getter.
Yes, yeah.
On everything.
Any surprise on that?
No. I think there was just. I think the Reproductive Rights Coalition called this correctly. They were the country was exhausted with this discussion, and Trump himself is saying, "Let states decide." Well, guess what? Last night Arizona decided, and this issue is now off the table.
Matt, this issue may be off the table, and a lot of folks voted for this particular. Where were those folks when it came to the presidential race, when it comes to other things? Where were they?
Well, that's a great question. I think Wall Street Journal did some great reporting on this earlier in the year where they said there's voters that are going to vote in favor of this proposition and then vote a straight Republican ticket. And I think that comes to, I think the people that ran the initiative campaign did a phenomenal job, but I think broader as a party, we needed to do a better job of messaging that party is going to try and undermine that proposition if it gets through. And there's a disconnect there. Otherwise, people would be tying the two together. And they're certainly not tying Donald Trump to that, which
No,
is a huge miss.
and Prop 314, which is law enforcement, gets involved with immigration measures. Of course, this thing's got to wait for a federal court decision with the Texas thing. But be that as it may, again, you've got Trump, you've got Gallego, you've got abortion rights. Now, I think Paul Bentz was on our show a while back saying that is a voter out there.
It's a smorgasbord voter, right? It's
Yes.
like, I want some from column A, I want some from column B, and I'm going to go a la carte over here. That's what that is. And, on any immigration issue, you put it on the ballot, power abhors a vacuum, and they're going to fill it because there's massive frustration on that, whether it is actually going to do something, as Bob Robb in his column said, it really doesn't do anything, and it's not worthy, but it's still going to pass because people are frustrated with immigration.
And it's certainly not going to do anything until the courts figure out what to do with Texas.
Right. Yeah.
The law there. All right, Chuck, back to you. Go to the horse's mouth here. Prop 140, what happened?
Well, as President Kennedy used to say, we do these things because they are hard. This is very hard to do. You have these deeply ingrained tribal relationships in American politics. We endeavored to point out that they're not fair. Everybody needs to be treated equally. Everybody needs to be treated fairly. We didn't really get that narrative out there before the two parties got a hold of us, and the partisans in both parties got a hold of us and said, "Oh, this is a California communist, socialist," and people just shut down because there's so much information on the ballot. We would have needed a better information campaign ahead of time to elevate the issue, the narrative that we wanted to support. And man, we were fighting lawyers, we were paying all kinds of money to get it on the ballot, and so we did. Maybe not the end. It's still a very valid idea. It is a good idea for America to do this.
All right, we got like a couple of minutes left here, very quickly. The balance of power in the legislature. It looks like we could have a split. Talk to us about it here.
Well, again, still too close to call. There's going to be ballot curing efforts underway. I'm paying a lot of attention to LD4 and seeing what happens there. Obviously, it would be very concerning to me and members of my party if the Republicans expanded their control in the ledge. So we've just got to wait and see. That's kind of where we're at this point.
And real quickly, we saw Senate could be possibly divided here, but the House still Republican.
Well, the Senate still's got 2 seats in play, 4 and 27 that are still in play that could flip to Republican. The House, there's a couple of races in that realm as well, but it looks like the House is going to be 32-28. Looks like the Republicans picked up a seat.
Yeah, and there we go, 32-28 and possibly 15-15 there in the Senate, and you got a Democratic Democratic governor, I should say. So it should be a lot of fun.
Back to 1600 West Washington, where all the problems get solved. Ted.
Yes, okay, all right, that's good to know. Gentlemen, thank you. Great conversation. Good to have you both here.